Throughout history, Swiss soldiers were celebrated for their bravery and skill on the battlefield. Their reputation began in the days of the ancient Roman Empire, where they gained great respect from the invading Roman army. The Roman scholar Tacitus stated that the Helvetians are a people of warriors, famous for the valor of their soldiers. By the time of the Middle Ages, the area of what is now Switzerland was part of the Holy Roman Empire. It was also during this time period that Swiss soldiers began to be seen as a highly effective and ruthless fighting force in Europe. In 1291, 3 Swiss cantons, which were small sovereign states, formed an autonomous confederacy within the empire. This new Swiss confederation was still technically part of the Holy Roman Empire, but they had established local rule for political and military affairs. For a short while, the Habsburg rulers of the empire recognized the autonomy of the new Swiss confederation. By 1315, tensions between the confederacy and the new Habsburg rulers of the empire led to Leopold I, Duke of Austria, to invade and try to crush the rebellious Swiss cantons. Leopold I arrived near the shores of Lake Egeria in Switzerland in November 1315 with his army of 8,000 heavily armed knights and infantry. He was then ambushed by 1,500 unarmored Swiss Confederates coming down a steep hill. The Swiss rolled large boulders and attacked in tight formations using 7-foot-long halberds and longer pikes. Leopold's forces were completely taken off guard and had no defense against this type of attack. The Swiss routed Leopold's army, killing over 1,500 of them, while executing or drowning any fleeing troops, showing no mercy to the invaders. The victory assured the autonomy of the Swiss Confederacy. The Swiss learned that they could defeat larger, more equipped armies using longer weapons like halberds, with their soldiers placed in highly mobile, tightly packed infantry formations. They replaced many of their halberds with 18 to 20 foot long pikes, and were no longer disadvantaged against knights on horseback or heavily armored men-at-arms. These pike square formations became the model for the modern infantry regiment. Each Swiss canton had their own militias where every man was trained since a young age to fight besides their friends and neighbors. Despite mostly being poor peasant farmers, they were organized into well-disciplined, hard-fighting squares. The Swiss had a war-fighting ethos that few others could match, and actually enjoyed and took pride in combat. They excelled in ambush tactics, using the rugged terrain of their homelands to their advantage. Unable to afford heavy armor like of their enemies, they made up for it in incredible mobility. According to medieval sources, the Swiss could move at a dead run while maintaining perfect shoulder-to-shoulder pike square formation, attack in any direction, defend against attack from any side, sprint up hills, through forests, in order to charge into their enemies. At the Battle of Laupen in 1339, 6,000 Swiss infantry defeated a Habsburg alliance of 17,000 men, which included 1,000 heavy cavalry. The Swiss infantry square was proven to be highly effective against mounted cavalry. The Habsburgs tried again in 1386 to invade the Swiss Confederation, when Duke Leopold met the Swiss at the Battle of Sempach. The battle was a complete defeat for the Habsburgs, and Leopold and many of his Austrian nobles were killed. In the 15th century, when full-time professional soldiers were starting to become a necessity for empires throughout Europe, the renown of the Swiss made them the most sought-after mercenary troops of the time period. Swiss mercenaries were so respected that some leaders wouldn't take the field of battle unless they had some of them in their ranks. Empires throughout the continent would get into bidding wars for the opportunity to hire them. What made the Swiss especially feared was their concept of no quarter for invading enemy troops. They made sure to kill any enemy soldiers who dared to trespass on their lands. Prisoners were soon executed after capture. Over time, more Swiss cantons joined the Confederacy, so by the year 1353, there were a total of 8 formed together. The most well-known Swiss wars against invading armies took place in the late 1400s. In 1474, the Duchy of Burgundy invaded the territories of the Swiss Confederacy. Their leader was Charles the Bold, who was considered the greatest duke in Europe and had one of his most feared armies. The duchy was beaten in battle in both 1474 and 1475, and Charles's 20,000 troops were defeated by the Swiss at the Battle of Gronson in March 1476, losing most of their treasure and artillery after they fled the battlefield. Charles tried again at the Battle of Murten in June 1476, but he was soundly defeated, losing over 8,000 men, while the Swiss lost just over 400. The retreating duchy troops were cut down as they were pushed towards Lake Murten, with the Swiss drowning them and executing them on the spot. A demoralized Charles the Bold and his army were completely defeated at the Battle of Nancy in January 1477. Swiss mercenaries assisting the Duchy of Lorraine found Charles on the battlefield and killed him with a halberd blow to his head. The Duchy of Burgundy ended with the death of Charles the Bold. In the Swabian War of 1499, between the Swiss Confederacy and the Swabian League of the Holy Roman Empire, over a dozen battles took place between January and July of that year. The Swiss won every battle except for a few minor skirmishes. At the Battle of Frostons on April 20th, 1499, the Swiss defeated the forces of King Maximilian, killing between 2,000 and 3,000, while only losing less than a dozen men. The Swiss again used the terrain to their tactical advantage, attacking from the forest and higher ground. The Swiss would cross mountain ranges in order to attack enemy positions from behind. At the final battle of the Swabian War on July 22nd at Dornach, 6,000 Swiss routed 16,000 soldiers of the Holy Roman Empire. Some Swiss units managed to sneak up on the enemy artillery positions and attack with such speed not a single shot would get off in the entire battle. The tactics and fighting ability of the Swiss pikemen were only finally slowed down with the invention and increasing use of gunpowder. Following their defeat at the Battle of Marignano in 1515, the Swiss style of mass combat fighting went into steady decline, to be replaced by guns, artillery, and earthworks. Switzerland would never lead another offensive operation outside of its borders after the year 1525, and it wasn't invaded again until 1798, when the French Republic attacked and conquered the country. Switzerland regained independence in 1815, and hasn't been in a state of war internationally since then. In January 1506, the first 150 Swiss mercenaries hired by Pope Julius II as bodyguards arrived in Rome. Julius believed that they were the finest soldiers in Europe at the time, and gave them the title as defenders of the Church's freedom. They became known as the Swiss Guard, and they are still performing their duties to the present day.